So I hope you're starting to get this thing where we jump over the documents, look them up, try to reconcile stuff, think it through, work through some discrepancies, like with the address thing on an article is saying author information, but we got over to address, it said contact information. And then we looked at the example and it was like, oh, okay, the author with the contact information, maybe that'd be the call for using address. And then we just thought about, what does address mean? Address means the address. It's pretty much contact information. That's what address says, right? So let's just use it in that context. So, hopefully you're seeing how to sort of think these through, work them through. And the next ones we're looking at are aside, footer, and the headings, H1 through H6. So aside is content related to something, right? Reading documentation on aside. So I've got a link there, and I created this a while ago. So I'm not sure what we're looking at here, but here we've got examples. One of the first places I like to go. Here we have an article, and then we have an aside, right? And so this aside here is kind of like a pull quote. And a pull quote in publishing is like, also known as a lift-out pull, is a key phrase, quotation, or excerpt that has been pulled from an article and used as a graphic element. So there would be a pull quote right there, that little deal over there. So that's that one. And then this documentation is pretty much going to tell us the exact same stuff as over here. So some examples would be a sidebar, an insert, advertisements, biography of the author, related links on the blog. And I put some other examples in here. So let's just go take a look at those for a second and see what they look like. Get rid of these pages. And yeah, so that's one we just saw. And then here is another aside. My family and I visited Epcot Center. Aside, Epcot Center. The Epcot Center is a theme park in Disney World. All right, so it's related. And aside, revisited. And let me refresh this page to see if I've highlighted anything on it, because sometimes it takes a moment for the highlighting to show up. Perfect. And it's acceptable for secondary content when not nested within an article element, right? And so it should be used for content tangentially related or secondary content when it's not nested within an article. So that's kind of cool. And that's where we get like advertisements and things like that. All right, so here's the footer. Footer is a lot like header. We saw header up here. It's kind of like the complement to the header. And I kind of place these in order from top to bottom that you might use them on a document. And so here is a footer. And so I feel compelled also, just let me interject. This is the precision part, right? Learning the precision of each of these elements so we understand what are their characteristics and where do we use them. So footer of a section, document outline, content sectioning, categories, right? So more of that stuff that we could go look up, the documentation there. So some examples, information about the author of the section. So it's we would use a footer for that. So if we are in an article, then we could have at the end of the article a footer where we have information about the author. And I think that's exactly what the article tag did. So if we go look at this content sectioning, the HTML reference, and here's the content sectioning, and we look at the article. So each blog post, right, had a footer by Tom. So that was, directly here speaking to information about the author of a section. Copyright data, links related to related documents. Enclose information about the author in an address element that can be included into the footer element. So that's if we have contact information. I'm going to change that. Enclose contact information. I guess it would be the whole thing, the author and everything, and the contact information. And the footer element is not sectioning content and therefore doesn't introduce a new section in the outline. Whoa. So that's the exact same thing that we saw a couple of times already. When we start, right now we're working on just breaking up the content in our document into different sections. And then next we're going to work on the outline. When we work on the outline, right, some of the stuff we've done here in the first part in breaking up content into different sections in our document will contribute to and help build the outline. And these tags right here will help build the outline, as will this stuff, right, the headings. But header and footer will not. And there's a reason for that. You might be asking why, but why? And if we look at content categories, we see down here under sectioning content that sectioning content defines the scope of headers and footers. So each section could have a header and footer, and except headers aren't going to have headers. So if they were creating their own section and outline also, that wouldn't necessarily make sense. That's kind of the reason. You could read that and think through it, because it does take some thinking, but it's not all that super important. You just have to know that header and footer do not contribute to the outline. And that's exactly what this deal right here says. The footer element is not sectioning content, therefore doesn't introduce a new section in the outline. I'm just going to change that. The footer element doesn't introduce a new section in the outline. There we go. Heading 1 through heading 6. So these are headings. And we have the head, which is like the top part of the document, the web page, right? And then we have the header, which is a semantic HTML element, right? Header. And then we have headings. So make sure you're clear on those three. And I feel compelled just to sort of show. Here's the head, right? Here is a header. Here is a heading. Okay, so head, header, heading. All right, so headings, they structure content on page by topic and importance. The more important, the higher the rank, or the more important is H1, the less important is H6. And you can see the documentation here, right there. So this actually takes us to the W3C. So that's even more difficult to read than the MDN. But W3C is kind of like the official place, and then MDN is built off of that. But MDN is much better to read. But anyhow, the things you could get from this right here if you read it, and feel free to, you can see I've highlighted a fair amount there, and a lot of that's about outlining. Yeah, creating outlines. So, but here's some of the most important information. The first heading in an explicit section represents the heading for that section. So when we start doing outlining, we're going to come back and look at this. Subsequent headings of equal or higher rank start a new implicit section. Subsequent headings of lower rank start a new implicit section that is a subsection of the previous section. So here's an example what all that means. Right? So here is the heading for the body. So these tags, this layout right here creates this outline right here. So this is a little bit of a preview of creating outlines. And then this outline right here, and it broke up onto 2 pages, creates this outline right there. And so you could, kind of see the difference between those two. Here, this heading for the body creates that right there, right? But here we just have an article with no H1. So that's an untitled body, and then we have the heading for the article, which ends up down here. Right, so yeah, explicit, implicit sections, all that. That's kind of like what we're going to get into with outlines. So we'll come back and we'll look at this. But that's just a little bit of a preview for you to familiarize yourself with it. And then in a couple of minutes, in a couple of videos, we'll be looking at how to do outlines. All right, so that's the side, the footer, and the headings H1 through H6.